So the first topic that I want to dive into is historical voter suppression in the United States, the ways that we've experienced it in the past and the ways that we still experience it now. With like the 1870s and the Jim Crow voting laws, they had requirements in place where people had to pass literacy tests, in order to vote, which nearly made it impossible for uneducated former slaves. In other states, they had instituted poll taxes as barriers for people to try and vote. There were whites-only primaries in some precincts, and then, as we know, the 19th Amendment came along and women received the right to vote, but it wasn't really all women until really the Voting Rights Act of 1965 had really eradicated the Jim Crow voting laws. So if anyone wants to just share anything that they have to say about, this topic, feel free.
I mean, voter suppression still exists. Sorry, should I introduce myself first?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Donia. Basically, I mean, when you see it, it's the way that in some states it works. It's so that people of color, poor people can't vote. They're not they make it more difficult for people of color, and they don't want you to vote. So it's almost like it doesn't seem like anything's changed that much. It's almost as if only the face has changed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. For those joining us, hello and welcome, and thanks for joining. We're talking about historical voter suppression in America and the ways we still experience it today. So if anyone wants to further discuss this, feel free to chime in.
Great, hi, I'm Sarah. I just wanted to point out just kind of what recently happened this past week was Bloomberg, I'm not sure, I think I made pretty big headlines, but he paid the fines of 32,000 ex-felons down in Florida, so they would then have the ability to vote, which is one of the few, honestly, I could be wrong, I think it's one of the only states that you can vote as an ex-con. So just right then and there, we're talking about 32,000 additional voters that never had the chance to vote, and possibly couldn't even have done, given their financial situation too. So it's kind of just, you see that number and it's whoa, there's a lot more people that are unable to vote, even though everyone should have the right to vote here.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. That's a thing in our system that felons or ex-felons can't vote. It makes you really question what is the reasoning for that. I understand that they've done some things that they had to pay the consequences for, but I don't know if voting should be such of a consequence that they that right is taken away. I don't know.
I almost find it sorry.
Go ahead.
I find it amusing that I almost find it amusing because it's you're required to pay taxes after once you get out of jail. You're required to do everything that a citizen is supposed to do in this country, yet you don't have the right to vote. And I'm pretty sure this place started because people were mad that they had to pay taxes without anyone representing them. So it's there's this hypocrisy happening. But again, it's really just because they don't want people of color, and that's all people of color and poor people to vote, because they don't like their opinions, I guess. They don't, and people of color are in the majority. And anyways.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say the same, how it's such a hypocrisy. My dad is actually an ex-felon, and when he did get a felony, he was so young, and it was very, very petty, actually. The reason why he did, and this just goes to show how our system is so flawed and how it purposely chooses to hold people back, especially people of color. And it's saddening because, just like you said, he's a citizen, he pays taxes, he works extremely hard, and he's not the person that he was when he was 19 or 20, so the fact that these laws are still in place, I just find it, again, it's to take people like ourselves out of the picture, because obviously they don't want our opinion. So it is quite frustrating, and it's saddening, to say the least.
I always I hate, yeah, I hate the prison, I was going to say prison experiment from what's his face, but no, the prison system, because it's not like, we talk about it like to do your time, and then like you put in all this hard work and just kind of expect you to be like, all right, like whatever, like we're done with you. And they use a lot of it for tax purposes and like gerrymandering and redlining, well, not redlining, but like gerrymandering and using prison as counts towards your county and representatives and states and what, so that Republican leaning areas are able to have the prison areas so that they can get the heads in the prison to then count for their vote power. But within all of that, like there's no like true rehabilitation. Like some people have like, I always like view felonies are so weird because it's like, some people like do deserve like this time and everything. Like there are like child molesters and like actual like bad people. And then there's just people that were, with the war on drugs, just had like an ounce of weed maybe, and then they have to do like as much hard time or more. And it's like, we need to really like, I feel like white America is just so like hubris and like thinks that it's invincible. Like it has a Rome complex, but like Rome fell and America can easily fall. We just think because we're in the present, like we can't change or do anything differently. And it's like, no, like the only way that we would survive as a country is to adapt throughout all of it. And we have not done anything near that.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points about that. It's just so interesting to see the way that well, I don't want to jump into our justice system as of yet, but it is our justice system, and just the ways that so much of our history is still playing a role in what people experience today. And I think it's coming to light. It's been coming to light for many years now, but I think this year is one of those years that people are realizing and actually learning more about what's not being taught and what's not being said. And just real quick, so the last two speakers that spoke were Sean and Tatiana. If both of you can just introduce yourself. If you want, you can share like what you're doing right now in life, but if you don't have to.
You can go first.
Thank you so much, Sean. My name is Tatiana Donaldson. I am the founder of Ambitious Black Girl Community, Sanctuary, and Sisterhood. We are an online platform that chooses to amplify Black voices, Black narratives, specifically for Black girls and women. I am currently living abroad. I've been living abroad since pre-COVID, so the beginning of 2020 here in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, where I am an educator at a private international school.
Wow, I feel like my life's like not interesting anymore. Hi, my name is Sean Davenport. I'm a recent graduate from Hofstra, where I know Gabby. I currently am the founder and CEO of Hair Cosmetics, which is a purpose-driven brand to reverse the damage of the beauty industry. So we do everything from donating to local animal shelters to animal rescue organizations, from lab testing and standing up for like civil rights and whatnot. So donating to bail funds. I did that in June and I was proud to do that. Just donated to wildfire relief funds in California. So just creating a purpose-driven platform within that. I'm super close to getting certified by B Corp, which is the benefit corporation nonprofit, which is what certifies companies to be purpose profit, which is like what Ben and Jerry's does and stuff like that. So I'm super close to that, and that's what I've been mainly doing.
Phenomenal.
Yes, awesome, both of you guys, everyone. So I'm going to dive into the next topic. I want to talk about the 2016 election and even our experiences with voting in the past. Today actually makes 4 years since the presidential debate, the first presidential debate for the 2016 election that was held at Hofstra University. So a few of us had the pleasure of being on campus during that time and during that season, which is very, very interesting. So even if we dive into that as well, that would be very cool to further discuss and reflect on.
I guess so. In 2016, I had just turned 18. I was about as excited as someone could get to vote. I looked forward to it my whole life because I've always been interested in politics. That's, therefore I became a political science major and now work in politics. It's great. I love it, but I kind of love it. But I just remember being so excited about everything that was happening on campus and looking forward to experiencing everything. Because I grew up in both my parents are immigrants. They don't know too much about American politics. So like all of this was new for me. And it was so fun. It was so exciting. Hofstra lost my ballot. I didn't actually get to vote in the 2016 election, which was unfortunate, but I am a California voter, so it would have gone to Hillary Clinton regardless. Thankfully, I'm not in a swing state, so my vote counts, but but I mean, looking back and then thinking to this year, I was so excited, and then just the complete opposite now. I'm mostly just concerned because we saw the turnout for the 2016 elections. It was low. It was really low. It's, I think, less than 50% of, there was no majority. The thing is like there was no majority. I think it was 54% of people went out to vote. I don't know the exact number. And then even a smaller percentage of those people decided who would be the leader of the free world. And we've seen what has happened in the past 4 years. Like, we've all experienced it, and the atmosphere that's been created is no longer conducive. I mean, it never was, but now it's continued to it's no longer conducive for people of color or women or people a part of the LGBTQ community. It's just continued to become worse, in my opinion. And I mean, we can even see that with different voting laws that have made it difficult for people to vote. And then also today, the nomination of the new, possibly the new Supreme Court justice, which is in itself really disappointing. So that light and that excitement that I had once, I'm only 22, I should still be excited to do these things that I grew up loving, but I'm not. I'm genuinely just concerned because I have two options. I have Trump, who we've seen can't do the job, and then Biden, who I am going to personally vote for, but he can't really string together a sentence. And so it's like, it's just, I don't have that passion for it anymore, but I'm in the sense that I'm excited, but I have the passion for it in that it needs to happen. And we all do need to go out there and vote, regardless of who you're going to vote for, obviously. It's just it's really important that we get more than 50% of people's opinions on who's going to be leading us for the next 4 years, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience to Donia in that prior to the 2016 election, politics was sort of everything to me. And then I think that I remember watching the Bernie Sanders movement in the 2016 election and being like, oh, that's crazy that you wouldn't vote for Hillary just because like you liked Bernie or whatever, because I was big into Hillary at the time. And then I think the night that Trump got elected, it kind of blew my whole world. I didn't think that something like that would happen. And then what I think was especially like changing for me in the 2016 election was watching the Democratic response to Trump getting elected. Instead of being like, we didn't do enough to motivate our base and do enough to speak to the people who we can normally rely on, and to say, whoa, there's way more people who think these crazy things than we were admitting to. I think the Democratic Party sort of went, oh, it wasn't fair. They rigged this, they did that, they did this. And it was never about the people and why that happened. It was just about like, what excuses can we come up with for why we lost? And it sort of made me look at the entire political process and go, oh, it's a game. And we get really involved in the game, whether which side you're on. Either your whole life is about hating Trump or your whole life is about loving Trump. That's how we've sort of become politically ideological. It's all based on how you feel about Donald Trump, pretty much. And so I think I've realized that what politics is it's sort of an abstraction of reality. We sort of take all of these day-to-day things and all these day-to-day issues and we abstract them into political issues. And we say things like, oh, well, that's politics, keep politics out of it. But politics is real life, right? Like every political issue and every political decision is about someone's real life and someone's day-to-day life. And maybe you think that a certain policy or a certain ideology is the right way, but there's always a fallout from that. And someone's going to think that you're destroying their way of life, right? And we see that on both sides. And I think the 2016 election was this sort of like right wing, we're angry with how the country's been going, and this sort of left wing, stick to the status quo thing. And neither are working. And so I think the 2016 election for the country, because you're seeing it now and people saying like, oh, I'm not voting for either of these people because it's the same thing, like both might as well be the same person. We sort of have this new ideology happening where we're buying less into the idea that politics is anything other than a reflection of reality. And we're sort of less willing to get engaged in the game of politics and more wanting to focus on the reality of what politics is and what politics does, which I think is a good thing. If you're like a super Democrat or a super Republican, you might think it's not a great thing. But I think the 2016 election was bad in a lot of ways. I don't like the outcome. I think that a lot of damage has been done from it. But I think personally, and for a lot of us, like it was very eye-opening. And I think hopefully like that sort of reality check of what's really going on, I think will be good going forward.
I have been just reading this book. I just picked it up. It's called Let the People Pick the President, the case for abolishing the Electoral College, because I never really understood the Electoral College before 2016. I was just like, it seems dumb, but I guess it works, okay. And then we saw that literally the majority of people that voted did not vote for Trump, and yet he won the election, a part of the game that Joey was talking about, where it's like, it makes absolutely no sense that these people only campaign in a few states. And for me, it's more important that my vote is in Ohio, and for me to stay registered in Ohio for as long as I can, instead of being registered in New York when I was living out there. It's like that the fact that I have to play into this game as well is ridiculous. And then it's all about like, I would talk to my parents who are Republican and they're in the other room, so I have to keep that hush. But I would always fight, and I'd be like, well, you know, like a person's vote in Wisconsin, because Wisconsin has such a low population per capita, per boundary, that they have to have 2 representatives and 2 senators, or 1 representative and 2 senators, something like that. And whereas in California, they are capped at 55 representatives and 2 senators. So they have 57 people representing hundreds, like 100 million people, or however many people live in California. And then Wisconsin has 3 people representing X amount of people. If you divide the math, you have more people representing, more power in the representation in Wisconsin than you do in California, by the way of how the representative house is all set up. And it's like, it makes absolutely no sense that people in Wisconsin have more of a power than somebody else in California, regardless of who they vote for. It's just like the Rust Belt has more of an impact because they have more land and it's supposed to be equal and whatnot. But if it's truly a democracy and it's truly, we have the capabilities to let everybody vote. We have the capabilities to count every single vote. Did this representative stuff when we all had to be on horseback in the 1700s and go down to like DC or Philadelphia or wherever capital was. But now it's like, we've outgrown this. Like, come on, let's put on our big boy pants and let's literally let the people choose the president. Like, if a majority of people had voted Trump, then, I mean, that would be a conversation, but it would have been a true election. Whereas this, it was absolutely, I don't want to say rigged, but it was just the system doing what the system was designed to do, which is not correct. And it definitely, it just never makes sense in my mind that I'm like, if there are more people that wanted this person, like, why is that not person in it? You know, it makes like no sense.
Yeah, not to even, also to include just how outdated the system is. I don't know if anyone else has. I know Sarah doesn't really like this musical, but I've been watching a lot of Hamilton and I've learned a lot through Hamilton. Not necessarily do I support all of the different stories and things, but it just makes me think about, we're still doing things the way that they were done back then, and it's upsetting and confusing and just, it's not welcoming for new generations to understand. I think right now we're all coming to a point where we're realizing our generation can be quite radical in a good way, and we're seeing that things shouldn't be this outdated and that things need to change, but we get kind of stuck, and there's a lot of barriers to making that change as well. To also share about like my 2016 election experience, I was a sophomore at Hofstra, and I just remember it was only a couple weeks into the new school year, and so we're all coming back to school, and still trying to get acclimated to the campus and really get into that second year and understand, like, who my friends are and, different things as well. And I think it really exposed a lot of true colors for me. It showed me, who can I look to for help, who can I not look to, who might be a true friend, who might not be a true friend, those types of things. And then I remember that year, actually, my grandfather had passed away in November, right before the election. And when the election had happened, and then when we got the news that Trump had won, I was home in Maryland with my family before traveling down south to go to our funeral for my grandfather. And I honestly remember just being so upset, but also so fearful as to what the next couple of days were going to look like for myself. Even just going down to celebrate the life of my grandfather was honestly kind of scary for me to think, I'm going down into the South to experience, family, but at the same time, what type of experiences may I come across just because now we have this person in office, and now people think it's okay to either talk to me a certain way or, to expose themselves and express themselves with full love and gratitude to Trump. So it was just such an interesting time as a sophomore in college.
Yeah, Gabby. Sorry, Joey.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to touch base on that because I hated the entire debate that was hosted at Hofstra. I also went to Hofstra. And I really struggled because, like you said, I thought it showed a lot of true colors. I'm from Vermont, so as you probably know, Bernie Sanders, the senator, like definitely, I grew up and was around a lot of people with that mindset. So I was very excited to vote. And I probably can not even count on my hand how many of my like close friends actually even got like an absentee ballot, all being not from New York, which I thought was like scary. And I was like kind of fighting, like, this is what we have to do. But I'll just never forget how much of a joke it was at Hofstra, and seeing Bring Back McKeeb signs as we had Anderson Cooper talking about the debate and all of these things. That was like, it was, you know, it was just so funny. And if we think back to how many people wrote in Hennessy and Harambe, I'm just like, are we kidding? Like, this is not at all what I thought my first presidential election time would be like. So I like really struggled with it. And I just want to kind of put that out there. It was not my favorite time at Hofstra at all. And like Gabby said, I think you saw your true colors. And I had a friend group that definitely did not see eye to eye after and split. So very near after. So I think a lot of things had to lead to that, and just viewing people differently and how they chose to view people. So, you know, definitely you go to college and you're supposed to learn a lot and definitely broaden your mind and perspectives on things. But that was just a whole nother experience for me that I really hated.
Yeah, I think that I remember talking about this a lot, like right after the election with my friends, that I think it was particularly jarring for our generation because we all sort of grew, I mean, we grew up through George Bush, but our president was Obama. And so, not that like now, like looking back, I think Obama was the best president in the world. He was definitely a really great person. And I think having someone like him in the office, we all kind of, our perception of things was that we were in the place where things were getting better. We weren't still at a place where racial issues and gay issues and economic issues and things like that we didn't think we were still in the grunt of it. We thought that we were in a place where we weren't over and things weren't done, but things were starting to progress in the direction we thought they should. And I think Trump getting elected was such like a reversion that it was like a lot emotionally for people in our generation, because it was like we thought and had grown up thinking we were in this certain place in the country, and then to learn that we are not even really close or even really heading in that direction yet, I think was a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on that. Was definitely a reversion for me as well. So the past 7 years I had been living in New York City before I moved to Phnom Penh, and it was just interesting to be in New York, and to have thought that we were in a place of progression and growth, but to see that that's definitely not where our society, where our country lied. It was very emotional. It was just very disheartening, and I was in this place where I was just like, wow, so the past 8 years, what did that really signify? Looking back now, I'm actually, I think it was a good thing I think the reasoning for Trump being president, there's a lot of positives to take away from it too. And I think it has helped us to open up our eyes and to educate ourselves more. And I will say that back then, I wasn't as educated on like the Electoral College and just what it really meant to have the power and the right to vote. I think I actually took a lot of it for granted, to be honest. I wasn't really voting within my state, and it's really opened my eyes to educate myself more. But it was definitely disheartening, just because I really thought we were in this place of progression, you know, for LGBTQ communities, for Black lives, for just everyone. And it was just to think about it and to see so many of my friends, or people who I thought were my friends or who were within my community. And I was working in the fashion industry as a makeup artist. So just seeing like my employees and a lot of my coworkers and their mindset, their mentality, and how it shifted once Trump was in office was just like, wow, so this is our reflection of America. And yeah, it was tough. So going back to what another speaker said earlier, I'm not that excited about voting, but I do think that this time around, I understand the importance of it. And that's why it's so important that I'm still avid, even if I am abroad. I am a US citizen, I am a Black woman, and we need to vote. It's just important.
I also think the first time around, like I mean 2016, it seems like the majority of people that voted were either so far on the right or the opposite so far. There was no common ground for people. Even like Hillary Clinton at the end of the day was not a common ground for anyone in the middle. But I think this time around, people in the middle have decided to come out, whether or not they support one side or the other. They've just decided they've to go off what everyone said, they've found that it's important to vote because you see what happens when you don't. You have a minority group making this decision for the entire group, and that's just wrong, especially in a place where democracy is like the whole pretty much the whole reason we exist. But it's just I think, and to go back to what was said earlier about kind of things that are outdated, I think the whole two-party system is completely outdated. There's no, like, for me, I've very openly been like, I'm someone in the middle. I support Black lives. I see that racism is so real and oppression is so real in the country, and I don't think we should be in places in countries that we don't need to be in, starting wars that we don't need to start. I also don't love paying taxes, but we don't have candidates or anyone that represents that. It's either we want to give huge tax breaks to the entire to only corporations. Let me just put that out there, or like, and we don't care about Black lives and people of color and women, or it's like the complete opposite where it's like we need to be a commune, and it's like, cool, but who am I supposed to support when those are the only options I have? It's just really interesting this time around, trying to see like the number of people that come out, and hopefully it moves people, it moves the country into like more of a progressive state where they choose to open up to different parties, different points of view, maybe away from white supremacy. Yeah. So I just read a report from Homeland, written in 2019, writing about how white supremacy is the biggest terrorist threat that this country has faced since 9/11. So I'm a little on edge at the moment.
I kind of going off what you said, Donia, with like the not wanting to pay taxes, because I think like what a lot of people always assume whenever I say like, oh, like I'm really left, they're like, oh, well, you just want to raise my taxes. And I'm like, no, because I hate paying taxes because I don't have money. I'm like, I am unemployed and I'm not even getting unemployed benefits because they didn't want to do anything for graduates, whatever. But I read, actually I didn't even read, I looked this up, and the percentage of taxation for the upper 500 families in America. So the 500 wealthiest families in America, in the 1950s, they were taxed at an 80% tax rate. So 80% of their income was taxed. That has fallen to 35%. We, on average, I'm making an assumption that we're all around middle class or whatever, we pay about 20 to 25%. So we are paying 10% less than what the Jeff Bezos is, because I have my own business, and you know, someone was like, oh, what happens when you make $1 million? Are you just gonna give it your money? And I was like, well, I don't need $1 million, but we'll get there when we get there. But even then, I'm like, Kylie Jenner is a billionaire, and it's still going to take 100 Kylie Jenners to reach Jeff Bezos. And so it's like that perception of wealth is like so out. It's so weird that it's like, even like Beyonce is $400 million. It would take so many Beyoncés to meet that one person, and I view them at the same level because it's just rich. Or like Jeffree Star, he's another, problematic as he is, he's a very wealthy person that shows it off, but like his wealth is only like 100 million, and it's like, I'm like, okay, we need to tear down his house because that's a mansion that could fill like 100, 200 people. But you know, so it's just like, if we really like were able to take a step back, like we would be able to marry all the ideas if everybody were to just be like, hey, like let's just all like take back, breathe, and just realize that like we kind of want the same things at the end of the day. Not realistically, because there are evil people out there, but ideally, like we would be able to have lower taxes and whatnot and still progress socially. And because like human rights, like it should be, you do, like there should be protections on human rights, and then, you know, like things like abortion should just be a you do what you do, like it's not my business, you do what you want to do. Whereas like pro-life are like, I'm gonna kill you if you get an abortion, and it's like it doesn't make sense like that. So it's like there needs, not like, yeah, there needs to be a way that we're able to like just find that balance, because it's so extreme. And I don't want to ramble on too long, but if anyone else has watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix, I highly recommend. Scary as heck. I don't know how PG we can be on here, but it's scary as heck, about just how radicalized our world has become, because virtual worlds of social media just allows you to spiral on to be radically left or radically right and not hear any opposition, where we don't have that dialogue to be like somebody, like one of my friends, I think she voted for Trump, I'm not entirely sure, but she was just like, oh, well, I just didn't want Hillary because I didn't know, blah, 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 I didn't want my taxes raised. She's just a fiscal voter. And I was like, oh, well, you know, like more often than not, like our taxes wouldn't be raised. And I try to explain like the wealth gap and everything. And then it was kind of like, oh, like as long as my taxes don't get raised, like I want to support like the Democratic Party, but I just don't want my taxes raised. And so it's just like an misinformation and like this idea of each other. And like some people just voted for Trump because they didn't want the taxes raised. And it's like, that's not, like, that shouldn't be something that like you do. Like, I don't know what the solution is to a non-two-party system. I'm not very that political, but all I know is that I'm like, it's just the taxation is like, because our money is so important to us. Our money is our value of life, and if like poverty is basically a crime at this point. But it's like we can easily, like we have the fund, like we have the money in America to do this. Like we can do this. It's just like how. And it's like I can't just vote and then it's like, oh, you know, everything goes together and like all this plan. So it's like, what else can like we do, especially because I kind of feel like sometimes it's just like, yeah, we need to do this, and then I just can vote a few times a year and then that's kind of it. That was a long ramble, I'm sorry.
No, I'm definitely with you. It's like, you're completely right. What more can we do? And that's something that I've been questioning. Okay, I'm going to vote. I'll continue to vote. I'll continue to, you know, cast my state votes. But what more can we do? If our system is so outdated, which we all know that, what are ways that we can implement true change? And I know that that also starts with us voting so that we can put the right people in these places of power, but it's such a deeply rooted system, you know? So it's like, how do we create true change, you know? And that's what I've been questioning, you know, personally with myself the past few months. So yeah.
I think that's a really good question in quarantine. I think especially I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like I kind of felt so helpless. Like there was nothing to really do. Back in April, November felt like years away. And so I remember when I got my census in the mail, and it was kind of like, oh, like, have you filled this out? And I was like, oh, this is my first time ever like doing it, living in an apartment, not by myself with a roommate, but, you know, having to do it. And I just kind of learned how it was so important to fill that out, like regardless of any political affiliations, regardless of immigration status or anything, just to know, like, once we elect these people, where the money's needed too. So, because that is really how we get the money to the places that, you know, need it most, and the organizations that need it. So I think that was something that I learned was like a very small thing that we can do. Well, I felt so incredibly stuck, and I still feel stuck all the time. Like I got the census for you, and that's where I'm going to stop. But that is something I didn't even realize the importance of, because I don't ever remember my parents talking about it. Like that's, oh, this is the census came. Like I couldn't tell you one year that I even recall my mother saying that. And I'm hoping she filled it out, but definitely something new that I learned recently.
I was also going to say, I find it interesting. I mean, an education system is a whole nother topic, but and within our education system, there isn't enough emphasis on the importance of voting and the process and what that looks like. I'll also just chime in and say that I am going to vote for Biden. But there is a third party, Joe Jurgensen, I believe that's her last name, that I was actually doing a lot of research on. And I just find it so upsetting that she doesn't have enough media outlet for people to at least know who she is. You know what I'm saying? Like, again, like, why do I have to vote for either Trump or Biden? I just think it's so unfair, not just. And that just goes to show the flaws within our system, our pre-existing system.
I don't want to take too much of the spotlight, but I saw this video once where it was talking about a ranked voting system where we don't do the DNC, we don't do the RNC, we get rid of that. Well, or maybe this was about I'm not entirely well versed. It was a while ago. However, let's say that we just get rid of the parties and it's just all these candidates that kind of are running. And then you rank them. So you could say, I'm just going to name names off the top of my head. Let's say you wanted Bernie first. So you do Bernie. And then number 2 is Warren. And then number 3 would be like Joe Jurgensen. And then number 4 would be like Mitt Romney. I don't know. And then like you could put Trump at last so that it's not just one person, and then if that vote doesn't work, that you don't get that vote. Kind of like how, I know what it was about. How our congressions within, the gerrymandered, terrible congressions and whatnot, those votes are the representatives that get sent to the states. So my county would vote one way, but instead of my vote not being taken, it would then be like reworked around. Basically, this is a terrible description to basically say that there is a solution to not just voting for one person, but showing the actual idea in the, like, being like, oh, I want to vote for this person, but they don't go or they drop out or something happens to them, then cast my vote as this, not throw my vote away and then it's never to be seen again. So it's just like, it's easy things like this that I'm like, just why don't we? Like, I mean, I know why, but like, why don't we?
Yeah, I think that conversations around like voting and how democracy is done in America, I think we often go to like the rank thing that Sean was just talking about and like how can we change the system. But I think that like the conversation we have to have first, that this is a lot of why I was disappointed with the Democrats after Trump got elected, and why I've sort of disassociated myself from that party as well, is that I think we need to have a conversation about ideology first, and we need to figure out what our ideology is going into voting. Like, I think that we've sort of all accepted this idea that there'll be a group of people up there and you have to pick one of those and then that person will win, right? We've sort of accepted this sort of like pattern of how things are done. But ideologically, I don't think that's really matching up with what we want. I think that we often find that we're voting for someone who it doesn't really have like all of our interests, and we're like, well, I think this is like the better, right? So when you look at Biden and Trump, I think that I am going to vote for Biden. However, I'm doing so knowing that I don't actually think that there's any difference between the two of them. I think in rhetoric, yes, there's big differences, obviously. And I think in terms of optics, I think there's big differences in how they make the country look. However, in terms of platform and in terms of what they're going to do, I think there's no difference, because we've sort of accepted this money-based system. And so we have candidates, and we will always have candidates as long as we live in a money-based system, where they're not telling you what they actually think. They're telling you what you want to hear. So we don't vote for someone who's saying things that are true and that they actually think. We're voting for someone who can package what we want to hear the best. And I think that has a lot to do with the sort of financial issue that we have in voting, and that everything is based on who can raise the most money and who can get your attention the best. And so I think that while like a ranked voting system or a direct democracy, so getting rid of the electoral college will help, I think that the issue is, in terms of like candidate options, is this money thing. And it's, you don't have enough money to get your name out there. So I think no matter what sort of voting system we have, I think we'll have an issue of every candidate is doing something based on money, right? They need money, so they're going to sign deals with lobbyists, and they're going to get PACs and super PACs and things like that. And so I think that before we have a conversation about how we can make voting more impactful, I think as a country we have to have a conversation about why voting has felt less impactful and why the candidate pool has become so diluted, and why we're not happy with the two-party system, because for a long time we were, and that was viewed as a preferred system than anything else. So I think that we haven't finished doing the groundwork yet. I think if you're going to revolutionize systems, you have to revolutionize thought first. And I don't think we've done that yet.
That was good. Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
My whole job is to fundraise money for candidates. That's why I was laughing through everything you were saying.
I think
no,
that's
I
like
completely
part of the
agree
problem
with
that we
you.
don't acknowledge. Yeah.
No, when you look at,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I don't know, when you do the research on like how much money these people give, and I can't give too much, but like everything anyone donates is in the FEC, so you can see yourself how much people donate. But it's upwards of $15 million into these PAC, like the PACs and everything that they then donate to candidates, and it's a whole web of systems. And I mean, you're totally right. It's whoever has the most money gets the most airtime. It's also almost as if like whoever says the craziest things nowadays gets the most media attention on top of like the money aspect of it. Because like now, even if Trump didn't have all these ads rolling, he's still on Twitter saying wild things. CNN, Fox, MSNBC are all still reporting on him, saying crazy things. But I haven't really heard any type of plan from either candidate. To me, Trump is just saying wild things. And then on the other side, it's Biden not being Trump. That's literally all it's been so far.
I think that's. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, really quick, like, I think that that's the problem, right? Is that and I think that there's another issue that I have, and this was an issue that I realized after the 2016 election, is that we put too much I think that we as citizens need to take some of the responsibility of being like, we could change the system ourselves. We could change the way things are done ourselves, instead of being like, oh, it's so out of our hands and we need a candidate to fix it for ourselves, right? I think like what Tatiana was saying is in-state voting, right? Like starting local. If you start local and work your way up from there, I think that you'll see that you and your community's ideologies will make its way up. But I think we've abstracted national politics so much from ourselves that all we do is we look at candidates who are saying things nicely. And that's why I liked Bernie so much, and still do, because everything Bernie said wasn't so nicely packaged and it didn't come out great all the time. And sometimes he sounded crazy, and sometimes he sounded like really radical to people and things like that. But he was being honest, and he was saying what he thought needed to be done rather than what he thought people wanted to hear. And I think that the money in politics has made it to where we just have candidates to pick from who are saying what they think that people they want to vote for them want to hear, rather than what they actually think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I was gonna say with Donia about the whole Trump thing, like that's why he got so far in 2016 was the outlandish media stuff and whatnot. Like he just would do and say dumb stuff in 2015. Everybody thought it was a joke. We all laughed. We were like, oh, that's cute. This is so funny. And then he would just say the dumbest things, but that would get him press time, and that would get him exposure to these people that in these rural communities that like they're just so anti-politics. They were like, I hate the game, run it like a business, run the country like a business. That's what my parents kept saying to me, like, just run it, like ignore the politics. We need a shakeup in the system. And it's like, well, they kind of were right with that. It was like the opposite, where like we do need a shakeup we need the system, but like because he just said so much stuff, he got the media attention, and because you can get a media attention, that's how you keep going. And it's just who gets the most airtime, who has the most money that can pay for that airtime, or who can say the most outlandish stuff to get that airtime for free. And that's what Trump was able to do in the beginning, and then just pay for a bunch of ads and just run that and just go crazy to get people's attention to then vote. And it's like what Joey's saying, it's not ideological based, it's all money, because money is power.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to our very capitalistic system. You know, Trump ran it like a business. That's what Trump's been doing for years. And he succeeded at that. And that's because of the system that is in place. I feel like capitalism is protected, and it's here to reign supreme. And it's just so frustrating that, again, we're in this place where it's about the emotions of the people and how to rile them up, and also the amount of money that you have, you know.
I also think one thing we have to like look at is obviously something was not working prior to 2016. There's a reason that people went outside of the system, out of like the political system, I guess. And it had to be something with money, work. Like that's the only way that Trump logically makes sense as the candidate, as the president. So I think it's I don't know what it is. Maybe it was the movement of jobs within rural areas, because a lot of the jobs that people were doing, they're no longer like that. Those are not sustainable careers anymore. People don't coal mine anymore. We don't need coal miners anymore. A lot of manufacturing jobs don't really exist as much because, again, we have automated like systems that take care of those things. So I think on top of all of this, the importance of voting, everything that we've addressed today, we have to take a step back and think about the education that we're giving people. Because you're expected to go through like your education system, whatnot, and go to college, do what you need to do, or go find a job like coal mining. But some of these things don't work. So I think that's definitely a system we need to address in order to have a better voter turnout, and more educated people, because of course not everyone's going to have a master's degree in political science or, you know, business or whatever. But it's important that like at least between K through 12 or even after, there's some type of system where we can teach people how to find industries that work for them, so we don't have to run into this problem where people feel so disenfranchised by the system. Because yeah, earlier someone said Obama wasn't like the greatest president in the world, but he, you know, no one's ever going to be the greatest president. Everyone's human, everyone makes mistakes, everyone's just trying to do what they think is best. But when you look at it as a whole, it was working. So what was happening on that individual level that like people were no longer satisfied with what was going on?
I think the education part is also a big piece of it. And I wonder, because I feel like, you know, you either go to college or you don't. And I come from a small town in Vermont where I have, you know, a lot of people that were not fortunate or didn't want to go to college, which I understand. I don't think you need to go to college to be successful, like at all. I don't think, I mean, unfortunately in our job industry right now, it's definitely like pushed. But then I also just feel like there's this, well, I didn't go to college, I'm not continuing my education, I'm not going to continue to educate myself in any sense. And I don't feel like when we graduated high school, you know, I wonder to the people that didn't choose to go to college, were they encouraged, well, here are other ways to continue to educate yourself, whether it be about politics or the job industries elsewhere. So I just feel like there's this halt of, you like graduate high school and you're kind of done, like you join the workforce and like that's it, or you go to college and that's where you continue education. So I just wonder if there's something we can do, as you said early on, K through 12, to just be like, it doesn't end. It doesn't stop. And I just feel like some people think like doctors are kind of the only ones that have to continue to be learning and stuff like that. But I think in every type of field, we need to continue to educate ourselves, and especially around our country's politics too. So that's just a piece. I don't really know where to start with that, but
I mean, like simple engineering jobs, like welding, and not simple. I mean, just, you know, things that you don't need a PhD for. These are jobs, like, I think, what are they called? Like masonry jobs? I don't know.
Blue collar.
Yeah, these are such important things. But it's important to continue to educate people, because I grew up in Kansas, and one of the biggest things there was Boeing, which is the airline, they make planes, and that moved. So what are these people doing there now? Those are the people that are voting for Donald Trump, who sounds crazy, is crazy, but also, like, you know, sounds crazy because he's such a difference in the political system. And I don't know. Yeah, education is important. Voting is important. Everyone should do it.
I don't even think we like learned that in school, like in high school. I don't even know if I was told to register to vote when I turned 18 and was still like a senior in high school. Like, it's like, we just got to keep digging down lower in our age and fix this.
There's some quote that I think it might have been Bernie that said, "No country, or a country, is only as good as its education system." And I think that's kind of really when it hit home with me, how important education is, and whether or not like we believe in free college or whatever. But like, you look at countries that have free college, he would always compare us to like Sweden and whatnot, and like their like general IQ was always higher, their sense of collectivism was always higher as a country. And it like, from there, it made me realize how connected all, like everything, it's not just, oh, you need to vote and that's it. And like, there's so many interpolling systems with the education system, the socioeconomic status, the race, the war on drug, like there's, everything is so connected, and there's no one way to like fix it. And I was like kind of experiencing that, like with my business, my motto is to reverse the damage of the beauty industry. And I always was like, all right, I would just donate to animal shelters. But then I was like, okay, I do want to take a stand on other issues. But then I realized like everything can be connected, because to help save animals from labs, I have to, like, you have to support everyone, and you have to like fix all, like so many things are just broken, and it's not just a single fix to one thing. Like everything is outdated, everything is old, everything is so poorly designed for an old system that does not reflect who we are today. So like, we have to change how we value education and put the money into the education to start ground up. We have to start with like the like proper funding of school, or not schools, of like lower income areas, and help them like decriminalize poverty. And like, we have to do all these things because they all come together to creating a more equal and just society.
Yeah, and while we're on, you know, this topic of education, I think we also, you know, with what you said with starting from the bottom and moving forward, we're going to see how different our generations are with this election. I really think we will. We even saw it with 2016, but, you know, generations before us, the way that they were educated about voting, it was either that they didn't feel like they could vote, so they didn't go out there and do it, or they probably had a very confusing experience with voting, or just a lot of misinformation with voting as well. So that's interesting. And then now with our generations right now, and our youth, we're realizing how much of the education system is actually inaccurate. So going back to just provide more accuracy in our education system, and making sure that history was written correctly, really impacts the way that we can grow and the decisions we make with our votes and the mindsets that we have about different issues. It's very interesting just to think back about all the things that are missing in our textbooks and the things that we've learned even just this year, just from, you know, wanting to understand those things that are missing. It makes a difference. So while we're on the topic of how everything is connected, like Sean said, I want to touch on some different hot topics right now. One being, you know, healthcare. So with this election, a lot can be changed. Trump is in the midst of a pandemic. Trump is proposing that we completely get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And it's just so, if I can be honest, it's just like how inhumane, how inconsiderate and evil can you be? People are dying. And right now you want to say, let's completely get rid of the system, you know, let's think of something else. I will say, because I am in healthcare and right now I'm working on my master's in healthcare administration, so I'm learning a lot about the different secrets of our healthcare system, and that, yes, it's not great, it's not perfect, and there's a lot of other systems that we can look at and maybe try to model our own in that way. But it's just very interesting, and I don't know if anyone else has read into anything about this and has any perspectives to share as well.
I mean, I don't know too much about the inner workings of the Affordable Care Act. From the way I understood it was a way to get people insured. But yeah, especially in a time like this, I think it goes to show that what's going on, the current administration does not have any, like, completely disregards people of color and people that are impoverished, because healthcare is so expensive. I like recently figured out about my own health insurance, and I will be staying on my parents as long as I can. But it's insane the different. I couldn't get an appointment with my own doctor when I had COVID at the beginning of July because of my health insurance being, I had moved from one health insurance to another, and it was all these things, and I was symptomatic, but not enough that like I needed, like I had minor symptoms. But just thinking about all the people that have more intense symptoms, like, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to just not go to the hospital? I've heard of insulin rationing for people with diabetes. Again, that is not acceptable. There are certain things that are just not acceptable. I mean, I don't know the answer to fix the way that the healthcare system works. I can't claim to know that, but there has to be some way better than there has to be something better than what we are doing right now, because we're allowing people to die. I think we just surpassed 200,000 people's deaths just due to COVID. And it's just, one thing that I find interesting about that is there's a complete disregard for the people that have died because of that. But right now, such a hot topic is abortions and what women can and cannot do to their own bodies. That to me doesn't make sense. You care about something, and whether or not, whatever your point of view is, religiously, philosophically, whatever, on a clump of cells, ultimately, more than you care about the lives of 200,000 live American citizen people in this country. So I just, yeah, healthcare recently has been at the top of my mind. I just don't know a ton about it.
I also don't know like a ton about the inner workings of like healthcare, but I do think that healthcare is sort of the prime example of the issue I was talking about earlier, which is where we have an ideological issue. I think healthcare is a basic necessity and a basic right and should be provided for every citizen without paying at all. But that's not where we're at ideologically. So if you say you want free healthcare, the first question from people on the left and on the right is, well, how are you going to pay for it? Which I think that when people say that, they think they're being practical, but I think that that is showing an ideological issue, right? Where we don't say that about every issue. There's a lot of issues where we don't go, well, how are you going to pay for that? Or we don't question how we currently are paying for it. I think the military is a great example of that. But with healthcare and with things like that, things that predominantly affect people that we consider poor, although like I think I would argue based on the wealth gap that Sean was talking about, I think most people in America are poor. But I think that we say, how are you going to pay for that? Because it's an issue that doesn't day to day, if you are in the perceived middle class or if you're upper class, it doesn't necessarily affect you day to day, or at least a majority of people in those classes. And so I think the fact that we're having a debate over how we pay for providing healthcare for people to go see their doctor, which I think is just exacerbated by the pandemic, I think once again points to an ideological issue where we need to get out of this sort of capitalist mindset of everything has a price tag and we have to figure that part out. That's not practical. I think that's inhumane. And there are practical ways of paying for it and there are answers to that question. But I think the fact that that's even a question, I think once again points to an ideological problem that we have, that we're not going to be able to address any of our political issues or sort of systematic issues until we address, I think, the ideological problem of being wrapped up in finances.
Something that I just find so interesting is just the fact that we can have a president that can like rip away something like the Affordable Care Act, and how every 4 years we could potentially be moving forward towards a different healthcare system, or then, moving back. And I just don't even think that's right. And of course, all systems should be able to change if they're not working, but to fear like every 4 years that, if you don't make enough and your company isn't offering you insurance, that might be taken away based on the presidency. It's not right. I don't know how to fix it, but I think it's frustrating to think about.
Something I just was thinking about is how like I saw this video of this person and they were saying like we put so much pressure on the presidential race, and this is talking about us starting locally and whatever. We put so much pressure on the president and whatnot. And like, yeah, like Trump has power to do executive orders. I mean, we've seen them flop like with TikTok and all these things, but like he does have power. But most of the power of the laws and how the ACA is made and how all these things are made is Congress. And I think so many people, that's why it's all about flip the Senate, but like, that's something that you don't hear about. You just hear people say, vote for Biden, vote for Biden, vote for Biden. But I could be wrong, but I think even if we had Trump as a president, but we had an opposite Congress, there would just be so much infighting and so much whatever, because then I know the president can then like veto bills and whatever, and it's all this checks and balances thing. But the fact that a group can get in and just like modify everything, and then if we're going to go to the justice system, which I know we said that we weren't going to get into, but the fact that a president is able to appoint, Trump is able to basically have two people, maybe two, hopefully not two, but he's able to have two people stand on a system for life. Like Trump's ideologies are already going to stay with us for the rest of our lives with Brett Kavanaugh, and now they may be able to stay again, and then those 9 people are just basically not even chosen by us, like very indirectly are they chosen by us. And it's like, why is that our system? Like it could have made sense more, but it's like, why, like Joey's been saying, like ideological critical eye, like why are we like doing this? Like I guess like it just, the fact that we can flip-flop so much, and that like, one day, like my parents, because I'm gay, my parents were like, oh, well, LGBTQ rights aren't going to be, that's like the least of issues, so you don't have to worry about that. Which, as wrong as that statement is, at the end of the day, like she was right, like queer issues were not gay white male issues were not a big thing. A lot of other issues were within the LGBT community. But even now, like the fact that this woman can come in, and if a court case were to go up to challenge a gay marriage, it could be reversed just like that. Like the fact that there's that power within just like a few people, I don't know, it's just that just makes me feel weird.
I was going to say, we can definitely jump into the justice system. I wanted to talk about Ruth and her impact, but also, what this means for the future. Because as of today, we just got news of Trump's nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, and she even, had her own statement about what's coming next. So we can jump in here.
I think that, so I'm in law school, and so this week, pretty much all of my teachers like talked about the Supreme Court and Ruth Bader Ginsburg specifically, and I think that she was obviously an amazing justice, and she did a lot in terms of rights for women and gay rights, things like that. I think that it's another one of those things where I'm looking at the response from people, and it worries me. It worries me that Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying, we think, marks the end of democracy. It worries me with that and I think we do this too with fake news being on Facebook. It's like we think that means that it's the destruction of democracy. That's not. I think that's hyperbolic to say the least. Let's say, right? I actually don't think that Trump's nominee will get approved. But let's say that she does. There are other options, right? If we get a Democratic president in next, right? If Biden's the next president, he could put more Supreme Court justices on. The limit is not 9, the limit is 15. So we could have more, and there's no like requirements for putting more on. You just have to go through the same process. So even if Trump's nominee gets approved, Biden could come on and put, well, I'm going to nominate 2 people for the Supreme Court, and the Senate could approve those 2 people, and it's been done before. I think the last time it was done, that we went over 9, I could be wrong, Donia, correct me, I think was to get the New Deal through.
FDR.
I think FDR put 15 judges on to get the New Deal through. But I think that I think he got pretty close to 15.
Yeah.
I think he got like 11 on or something like that.
Yeah.
It was enough to get the New Deal through. Basically, the point is that I also am worried about a more conservative leaning Supreme Court, but I do think it's important that we don't dive into these like, oh, this is the destruction of the American way of life, all because an 87-year-old woman died. If our democracy is that fragile, then we have other problems. There's ways around it, and there's ways of dealing with it, and I think that it's not ideal, but I also think that it's not every issue is the complete destruction of our way of life.
I agree with you to a degree, mostly because democracy is, the way I see it, is very fragile. It always has been, because nothing is guaranteed. There's a reason certain like places, like the only place that comes to mind is Iran, but that's just because my parents always talk about it. There's a reason that those people are still in power, and they are able to be in power. It's because they oppress people. They kill people for protesting. They do what they need to do. And that, I could sit here and say I don't think that's going to happen here, but to speak about the justice system and see how protesters have been treated within the US, to see Breonna Taylor not have any justice for what happened to her, is kind of, I don't want to be, I'm not going to be one of those people that says like, oh, democracy is over, like whatever. I do have the fear though that we're going towards something that could ruin what we have created, if that makes sense. Because when you look at it, like here down in Southern California, what they were doing to protesters right after the murder of George Floyd, they were like they were shooting people with rubber bullets and arresting people for no reason. And whatnot. And it's just wild. It's wild because it's our right to peacefully protest, regardless of it being peaceful or not. It is our right. And that's what we were doing down here. And there were tanks in LA. There were tanks. That's what it looked like. And San Diego had curfew for a week. And so it's things like that it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying is kind of like the cherry on top for me, where I'm like, oh, we're going in a direction that is not feasible. Like, we're continuing to go in that direction because her death allowed for whatever, I don't know her name, the new Barnett, Barrett, whatever her name. I don't want to learn her name. It's fine. It allowed for someone like that to enter the system who she is so avidly against LGBTQ rights, against Roe versus Wade, immigration, pro-gun, which you're allowed to be. If you don't want to have an abortion, don't. But you shouldn't tell other people they can't do these things. It's becoming kind of out of, I don't know. I don't want to be like, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist on this call. But I understand where you're coming from, Joey. I just have a little bit of, I just have a fear because, and maybe it is because of the media, and maybe it's because I've spent too many years looking into politics, and maybe I shouldn't take everything so seriously into heart when it comes to these things.
Yeah, I've definitely I'm not muted. Good. I've definitely had to take moments away and just kind of process everything, which then it always makes me feel weird because then I'm like, oh, I have the privilege to walk away and everything, but I think our 24-hour news cycle has created this monster of a you have to be informed, you have to take everything, and then I think a lot of people take in information and kind of hyperbolize it, I guess, where we can go on these slippery slopes. And I think it's especially within this pandemic and the quarantining and everything, I don't have access to other people to kind of my own spirals or whatever. And I don't know if this is just a mental health thing with me, but I've noticed that sometimes I will just be like, oh my gosh, the world's ending, blah, 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 blah. But it's let's take something non-political, climate change or the climate emergency. I'm like, oh my gosh, we are dying right now. The world is over. But technically we have 5-7 years. I know that's not a long time, but it's I'm going to wake up tomorrow and the sun's going to rise. But then also at the same time, it's that doesn't mean that we can just pretend like nothing's happening. I think we have to have a little bit of fear that ignites, because I think maybe that's what 2016 was for some of us. It opened our eyes and ignited this passion inside of us to fight, but we can't over fear ourselves. Maybe that's what maybe Donia, you and I are doing, or it's sometimes we get so fearful that we're just I can't breathe, and we just can't process things, where it's and then Joey's well, we can't change, we can't do this. So it's I don't know, maybe it's a both scenario where it's we need the fear, but we also need rationality, and the world will go on and we can fight this and we can change it, and the system can change and we can break it and we can mold it and we can do whatever we want because we vote in all those people. We can do it, we can campaign, we can get the money, we can play the system and play the system to break itself. At least that's my plan. Whether that's right or not, I don't know.
I mean, I hear both of you. I do, and I'm also with you as far as just feeling that fear. I believe that, yes, there's so many people within our country who are for change and for progression, right? But there's that opposition, and it reigns very, I mean, there's a lot of power in that opposition. And I just feel like with, for instance, like our Supreme Court seat changing, you know, no longer Ruth is there. If Trump does appoint someone else, I do believe that there's going to be some change, and it may not be the change that we're looking for. So I'm in this place too, where I'm just like, with what's happening within media, and then what I'm seeing in our country, what I'm seeing, it's almost like factual. It's like these things are happening. So how am I not to be fearful about our future? And I know, again, that everything is like, we're small puzzle pieces within a very big puzzle, and we may not even see some of the changes that we really want to see within our lifetime. That is also a possibility. I think it's still important for us to fight, but at the same time, I do think that there is damage being done, and I don't know, it's a weird feeling. It's just weird. And that's why, like I said earlier, I'm in this place where I'm like, of course I'm going to vote. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to use my voice. But am I going to really see the change that we want to see? And that's just where I'm at, you know, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that like having fear about things like this, because I know that when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, like I also had the same feelings of like, oh no, what does this mean? Like a new candidate's going to get in. While I did like quickly revert to the whole like, okay, well, like there's ways around it. I do think that fear is like it's a positive thing in a lot of ways. But I think that at least for me, the fear wasn't like, oh, there's going to be like a new Supreme Court justice. My sort of fear was it really made me look at, oh, it's crazy how much we rely on something like who's on the Supreme Court for things like basic rights, right? Like gay people worrying about whether or not we're still going to be able to get married shouldn't be dependent on who one judge on the Supreme Court is, right? But it is. And I think that's what scares me more, is that we're seeing these things. We're part of a system where little changes happen, and it freaks us out and makes us think that the entire system's failing. And I think that that's a flaw of the system, right? That's a flaw of democracy. That's a flaw of capitalist democracy. And so I think that we have a tendency, especially on the left, to get really tied up in like the little battles. Whereas I think we should go, if one minor change, right, in a system makes us fearful that the entire system is failing, maybe that system needs to change. And maybe the system overall, we shouldn't be living in a system that's constantly on the brink of collapse, right? And we don't have to, but we are. And I think that's because that's the nature of capitalist democracy. And so I think that while that fear is good and it's productive, I think we have to make sure we're targeting it at the right things and turning that into action towards the right things.
I'll like, if I think like that, because like I don't disagree with you at all, but then like I always get caught up when I'm like, I can't conceptualize what another system is, because we've only lived in a capitalistic democracy. But I was just thinking the other day, like I saw this video on California and how in 200 years, white settlers have come in and destroyed a land that was used for 10,000 years. 10,000 years, Native Americans were able to live properly and whatever. And then in a blink of an eye, like white people just came in and just literally destroyed California. So now it's on fire. And it's like, it's so weird that like our lifetime, we think that this is the way of life. Like, I don't know another America besides a capitalistic democracy. So I don't have, my mind can't compute. I'm like, yes, break the system. But then I'm like, into what? And then I can't conceptualize that future. And I know there's no like one right answer, but that's always where I stop. And then I'm like, I think maybe that's where my shortcomings come in. And then I'm like, well, what do we do? And how can we do this? And then it falls apart from there.
I want to just kind of like expand on that. The thing is like, we don't live in like a complete, like there are certain things that are viewed as like socialist, or I'm not really sure, but like child labor laws, unions, a minimum wage, like there are things that we've adjusted and adapted to, and we totally can continue to do that if need be, if we find that is a better way of living here in America and continuing to thrive, or hopefully thrive. There's just like, there's small things that we've done and we can continue to do these changes, whether it be in like the healthcare system or in kind of addressing the wage gap, which shouldn't exist if we looked at the true theories of either system. So it's just interesting, but I think I agree with what was said earlier about how this one death should not define the whole system. Otherwise, the whole system, there's something wrong within the system. And I think it goes back to the parties, like the two parties that we have, and kind of the polarization that we've created within our society. Because you look at Brett Kavanaugh, he is an alleged rapist. And I'm just going to say he is an alleged rapist. But aside from that fact, his demeanor alone during the Senate hearings should have lost him the job. He should not have gotten the job. Because if I walked into an interview and started yelling at the person interviewing me, I'm not getting that job. But he acted like a fool and he still got the job. So it came down to, it was not that this person was the best person for the position. It was, who can we pick to stick it to the other guy? And so that's kind of where we're at. And we need to, at least in my opinion, I think that we need to come back to a place where we're no longer polarizing each other. And we don't have these weird extreme views on each side. It needs to come to a place, because at the end of where we can compromise. That's the only way that we can move forward, because at the end of the day, not everyone's going to agree with you, but no one ever changed anything by talking to people they agreed with. So at the end, we all have to somehow come to the middle and find a place where we can adjust to a degree that works for everyone. And maybe one day we adjust to something completely different. But right now, what we need is to come to a place where we can compromise and adjust and create a system that works for us better than what's going on right now. I'm not saying that it's going to work completely, because if that's the case, I'm sure we would have figured it out 100 years ago, or ideally we would have figured it out 100 years ago. But we can try to be better. We have to accept change as the natural process of things, but we can't changes. You look at just an organism, changes forward, not backwards. You don't reverse into something that'll die and be eaten by a predator. You adjust, you adapt to survive, and we aren't doing that right now. Yeah.
I think kind of like what Joey said with the ideology idea, and the breaking of the two-party system is really something that we just need to do. Because if we really did, if people really did care about America, then they would do what is best for all of America, which does involve compromising. And I think that with the rise of social media and the ability to create your own think groups, to just believe what you believe and listen to nothing else. Because I can go on Twitter and I could be like, Twitter is a socialistic news feed for me. It is just, I see probably the same 10 people likes and retweets. That's all I see. But then you can go to somebody else's news feed and it's a totally different world, because it's all about the algorithms that are going to find what you want to do to click and go through and get more advertisers so that you can get more money in Mr. Zuckerberg's pocket. And these social media is the way that young people consume news. I don't go, I go to New York Times because I've started to try to build away from the Twitter of it all. But then I also know that I'm Twitter also is where you can get authentic videos and whatever, and you see this, and it's just we do need to be able to break away from this party system, and like you said, pick the person that is actually best for the society of America, the justice that is most qualified for the position, the president that is most qualified, not who's gonna reverse what we just did back and forth for 4 years on, 4 years off, 4 years on, 4 years off of different views and flip-flop, but like somebody that can actually like just come through and be like, I
Sean, I think you froze, unfortunately. Seemed like you're in, I think you were about to hit a good point. I'm sorry that you froze, but hopefully you'll be able to share it when you get back. So while we're here, I just want to talk a little bit, maybe each of us can kind of go around and just share just their personal perspective about this question. So why are you voting this year? Like, what is your reason? Like, what is it? What's calling you to vote? Because everyone has the opportunity to decide not to vote. But if we're all agreeing that we are going to vote, and we all may have our own reasons, I want to just hear that, and maybe the listeners as well want to hear it too. So for myself, I'm voting because as a Black woman, I understand that it is incredibly important that I voice my opinion and that I stand up for myself, my community, and most importantly, other Black women as well. And I stress this incredibly so because of Breonna Taylor. Just the way that we've seen this case, there's not really a word for it, just the way that we've seen the case be disrespected and her life be disrespected, it's just disgusting, and it has ignited me to want to do more. You know, you always think that you're doing as much as you can in the moment, but there's always more to be done. So that is a major reason why I'm voting. If anyone else wants to go after me, go for it.
I'm going to go ahead and chime in with you, Gabby. I am choosing to vote and to deliberately vote this year because I am a Black woman, and I understand, I see how the system has definitely not supported Black lives, Black bodies, brown lives, and brown bodies, but definitely does not support and value Black women. And for Black women to be at the forefront of this country, to be the leading group of educated just beings, it is very important that I use my voice, that I stand up, that I fight, whether our votes count or not. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. I will continue to live on to fight their lineage, for their lineage and their legacy. Seeing how the Breonna Taylor case verdict had been dealt with, is being dealt with, complete disrespect, no empathy, just a slap in the face. And to see in 2020 that this is where we are after millions of calls in, votes, voices expressed, it's just sickening to see how America continues to respond to injustices on Black lives, to respond to the inequalities on Black bodies, on Black women's lives. And also just being outside of America, being a citizen now and living outside of America, it's a completely different viewpoint now. I see things for really what they are, and I'm so grateful, I'm so honored to not be in America during this time, but to still be within it. Because you really do see things for what they are and how America chooses to handle such situations. And I think it's important that I vote. I think it's important that I continue to fight, and that's the reason why I am voting.
Okay, so I'll go. Voting has always been important to me, and I will be voting this coming election. Both my parents are immigrants, as I said earlier, and they came from a place where because of their religion, they were not, they were persecuted against. And also being a woman in a country like Iran, I probably wouldn't have the right to vote. But I was fortunate enough to be born here. So I think it is such an important aspect of who I am and what it means to be just someone with a voice and the ability to be heard. I feel it's almost like a duty of mine that I have to vote. Voting this year, I think, is even more important for me because I've seen how this administration has handled healthcare, education, the coronavirus, and to go off of what you guys said, just seeing how the Breonna Taylor case was handled, we all knew that there's police brutality. Like that was something I feel like most people, or hopefully now, to see it on Twitter, on your news, and just see that it's continued to happen, and to the point where they're murdering people. We can't allow these things to continue to happen. The Breonna Taylor case broke my heart. And pretty much anything that Trump has done has broken my heart, outside of letting a few people out of prison, but not doing anything really for prison reform. So I think it's really important that we step up, we make a change, and we vote, and we make sure that our voices are heard, not only on the presidential election, but our senators, our representatives, our state and local elections as well, because those are the things that matter when it comes to our day-to-day lives.
I will mainly be voting for the environment in this election. I think a lot of people saw the post in New York with the building with the 7 years and the countdown, but this is a countdown that we've known about for a very, very, very long time, and it still isn't even taken that seriously. Well, I don't want to say that. A lot of people take it seriously, but I think that it is everyone's responsibility now to take action, and this is the main way that I'm going to take action that I know I can do, at least in the most current future. Also, for the right over my own body is another really big reason why I'll be voting, and hopefully that will then be funding Planned Parenthood again. But those are my two main platforms why I'll be voting.
So I am voting reluctantly, at least in the presidential election. I think most importantly, like Donia mentioned, I think I'll be paying particular attention to local politics, California state politics. But then I think in the presidential election, I'm voting, like Sarah said, I think that the environment is a big issue, although I don't actually see a huge difference in either of their plans. So I am voting. I think it's important to vote. I think particularly for optics, I think that's really the only difference I see between the two candidates, is I think that if we have someone in there who has at least a more progressive rhetoric, and I think a more a rhetoric that's at least slightly more focused on equality, I think that will help us to at least be in a position to start addressing the issues, police brutality, all of the racial issues that are endemic throughout the entire system, issues of poverty, issues of the environment. I think that at least having someone like Biden in there will allow us to have a platform to have the conversation. So that's why I am voting, but I also am doing it knowing that I don't think that we're going to get the result we want, even if the person we want to win wins. And so I think voting, yes, but then supplementing voting by taking action in your everyday life, in local politics, getting involved in protests locally. And then I think specifically for the environment, I think that, yes, voting for candidates who say they're going to do things about the environment, but then also taking personal action in how you live your life, and what you consume, and what companies you support and things like that. So I think, yes, I'm voting. I will be voting in the presidential election, but supplementing it with personal action.
I agree with Joey. I definitely think that voting should just be like a micro portion of all of our actions. I will be voting. I will be voting in Ohio, which is the swing state that has voted for the president since Reagan. So I think that my vote is probably one of the most important, which I don't think is ethical in any way. But I will be registered in Ohio, and I'll be voting, hopefully, to swing the state. I'm voting for the environment. I'm voting for all human rights, and because all these things should have been done, and definitely getting more involved locally, because I don't think I've ever really been involved locally in Ohio. I've really just been like, let me get out of here and just not deal with it. But this is like one of those places where you do have to, like, you just can't ignore, like, you have to do it from the ground up. Trickle down, we've seen, does not work, and we have to take personal actions. And I think the rhetoric of just making somebody else deal with it is getting old, and I think we do have to step up and do everything, not do everything ourselves, but we have to be conscious about these things and not just say, oh, I care about the environment, but then like go and support X and Y companies and shop from Amazon and just like eat enormous amounts of like red meat and not know. Like, we have to be extremely conscious, because all the actions we're doing today are not what we should be doing. Just because we're doing them doesn't mean it's right. So I think I'm voting, hopefully, as just a small portion in my political agenda.
Well, thank you, everybody. That was just lovely. And to those listening and watching, if you are not registered to vote, please get a plan and get it done. That's been my motto for this election season as we approach election. It's too valuable of a right that we have, and it counts. It really does. We've seen this before. And a few different websites that I've looked into, and platforms, Headcount, Ballot Ready, Democracy Works, they all have different ways that you can, find different resources, and educational pieces where you can read into, your local organizers, your local officials, and read more into exactly what people are offering, and those people who want to represent you, what they believe in, and what they are fighting for. So get a plan and get it done. Thank you all for joining me tonight. I am just so blessed and honored that you guys decided to be here and were interested and accepted the call to action, I would say. It wasn't any type of coincidence that each of you were here. Like, it was so perfect. And all of the knowledge that you guys have shared has empowered me, has enriched me, and I hope and pray that it will also do the same for other people. So thank you guys so much. So much.